Vacations were never something I grew up with. While other kids came back from summer break with stories about beaches or mountains, my memories were of sweltering afternoons helping my father repair the roof, or endless chores while my mother worked double shifts. Money was always tight. The closest thing to a getaway was sitting on our porch at night with a glass of lemonade, imagining what it would be like to see more of the world. As an adult, that didn't change much. I worked hard, harder than most if I'm honest, but there was always a reason to say no to myself. Bills, responsibilities, emergencies. A vacation was always someday. So when I first mentioned booking a trip to a luxury resort, my family didn't believe me. It started at Sunday dinner, the one day a month when we all crammed into my sister Kelly's oversized dining room. She and her husband, Mark, liked to host. They had the biggest house, the fanciest car, and the loudest opinions. That night, between bites of roast chicken, I casually mentioned that I was planning a vacation. Where to? Kelly asked, sipping her wine like she already knew the answer. The Seacliff Grand, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The one on the coast. The resort with the infinity pools. Forks clinked against plates. Then came the laughter. Mark practically choked. The Seacliff Grand? You? Do you know how much that place costs? Kelly shook her head, a smirk playing on her lips. You're joking, right? You can't afford that. None of us can. I felt my face burn. I've been saving, I said quietly. That only made them laugh harder. You've been saving? Kelly echoed. Come on, you live in that tiny apartment. You drive a 10-year-old car. You're always saying you're too busy working. Since when do you have Seacliff money? The others at the table chuckled, and I wanted to disappear. I'm serious, I said, forcing my voice firm. I booked it. The table went silent for a moment. Then Kelly leaned back in her chair and raised an eyebrow. Sure you did. And I'm the Queen of England. Mark chimed in. Maybe she's got a Groupon, he joked, sending another wave of laughter around the table. I clenched my jaw, saying nothing. What could I say? That I'd been working 70-hour weeks for the past 2 years, taking freelance jobs on weekends, cutting corners on every expense just to make this happen? That I hadn't bought new clothes in over a year, that I'd canceled cable, that I'd said no to every indulgence because this trip was my gift to myself? They wouldn't understand. They didn't want to. But I knew. I knew what I'd earned. The day of the trip arrived, and as I packed my bag, their voices still echoed in my head. You can't afford it. You don't belong there. The drive to the coast was long, but the moment I saw the resort, my doubts melted away. The Seacliff Grand rose like a palace against the shoreline, its glass windows shimmering in the sun, balconies draped with bougainvillea. The scent of salt water mixed with jasmine filled the air. Inside, the lobby was even more breathtaking. Polished marble floors reflected chandeliers that looked like cascades of light. Staff in crisp uniforms greeted guests with practiced warmth. For a moment, I stood frozen, afraid I'd stick out like an imposter. But then something happened. As I approached the front desk, the manager herself appeared, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a polished smile. She scanned the lobby, then walked directly toward me. Miss Carter, she asked. My throat tightened. Yes. She smiled and extended a folder. We've been waiting for you. If you could just sign here, we'll finalize your suite arrangements. Heads turned. Guests glanced my way. I felt the weight of their stares. The manager's words rang in my ears. We've been waiting for you. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Because in that single instant, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the one they laughed at. I was the guest of honor. And little did I know, that signature would change everything, revealing secrets my family never imagined, and turning my so-called vacation into a reckoning they'd never forget. The pen felt heavier than it should have. As I bent over the folder, the sound of the lobby seemed to hush, the chatter of guests, the clink of glasses from the bar, even the faint music from hidden speakers. I signed my name slowly, deliberately, like if I made one wrong stroke, they would take it all away. The manager's smile never wavered. Excellent. Welcome to the Seacliff Grand, Ms. Carter. Your suite is prepared. Please follow me. She gestured toward a bellhop who appeared instantly, ready to take my luggage. I followed in a daze, heels clicking on the polished marble, trying not to gape at the grandeur around me. The bellhop led us to a private elevator tucked behind a velvet rope. When I hesitated, the manager said warmly, "This is for our VIP guests. It's faster." VIP guests. The words rolled through me like champagne bubbles. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to call my family right then and there, and say, "Look at me now." But I bit back the impulse. No, let them find out another way. The elevator opened onto the 10th floor, where the hallway was lined with fresh flowers and plush carpeting. The bellhop unlocked my suite, swinging open the door with a practiced flourish. I stepped inside and froze. The room was unlike anything I'd ever seen outside of glossy travel magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the endless ocean, waves curling and breaking against the cliffs. A king-sized bed with white linens faced the view, its pillows stacked like clouds. A balcony stretched outward with 2 lounge chairs and a small table. On the marble counter waited a bottle of chilled champagne with a handwritten note, "Welcome, Miss Carter." My throat tightened. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. The bellhop placed my bag gently on the luggage stand. "If you need anything at all, just press the service button," he said with a bow. When he left, I sank into one of the chairs by the window, staring out at the glittering horizon. This is mine, I thought. I made this happen. But as the hours passed, the glow of triumph began to blur into unease. Why had the manager personally greeted me? Why a suite like this? I had booked a room, yes, but not this level. My savings hadn't stretched that far. The next morning, I walked down to breakfast. The restaurant overlooked the ocean, sunlight flooding the glass walls. Guests murmured quietly at their tables, sipping coffee, nibbling pastries. As I took my seat, I noticed eyes turning my way. Subtle, but enough to feel. The waiter approached instantly. "Good morning, Miss Carter. Your table is always reserved. Would you like your usual coffee?" "My usual?" I asked, startled. "Yes," he said smoothly, though a flicker of confusion passed over his face. "Double espresso, 1 sugar." I nodded slowly. "That's fine." When he left, I pressed my hands against the tablecloth, palms sweaty. Something was happening. Something I didn't understand. Later, by the pool, it happened again. A staff member hurried to adjust my umbrella before I even asked. Another brought me a tray of fruit, bowing slightly. Other guests whispered behind their sunglasses, glancing at me, then back at each other. By the 3rd day, the whispers had grown louder. I overheard a couple near the bar murmur, "That's her. The Carter account. She's the one." The Carter account. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Kelly. "So you're really there? At the Seacliff Grand?" Pictures, or it didn't happen. I almost laughed. Instead, I snapped a photo of the balcony view and sent it. The typing dots appeared. "Then, you got a deal or something, right? No way you're in a suite." I didn't reply. Let her stew. But inside, my doubts gnawed at me. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe they confused me with someone else. The answer came 2 nights later. I was in the lobby, returning from a walk along the cliffs, when the manager approached again. "Miss Carter," she said warmly. "A pleasure as always. I just wanted to confirm our arrangements for tomorrow's luncheon. You'll be seated at the head table, of course." My mouth went dry. "Luncheon?" She blinked. "Yes. The Carter account requested it. We're hosting several investors. Your signature secured the reservation." I stared at her. Words stuck in my throat. Then slowly it clicked. They hadn't mistaken me for someone else. They thought I was something bigger. And as her words settled in, another thought came. My family had laughed at me, dismissed me, mocked me. But soon they would see. Because this vacation wasn't just a getaway anymore. It was becoming the stage where their ridicule would collapse, and my revenge would unfold. That night, I barely slept. The sound of the waves outside my balcony should have soothed me, but my mind churned. The Carter account. Investors. Luncheon. Words that didn't belong to me, but somehow clung to my name. I woke early, nerves buzzing, and dressed carefully. Simple but neat, the pastel blouse I'd packed with dark trousers. Nothing flashy. I didn't want to draw more attention. Yet as soon as I stepped into the lobby, heads turned. Guests nodded politely. Staff smiled deferentially. The luncheon. The manager herself guided me to the ocean view banquet room. A long table gleamed under crystal lights, places set with white china and polished silver. I tried to protest. I'm not who you think I am, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself at the head of the table, a glass of champagne in front of me. Men and women in suits arrived, greeting me warmly, speaking about investments, portfolios, expanding opportunities. I smiled, nodded, said little. My heart pounded, waiting for someone to realize the mistake. But no one did. By the time dessert arrived, I realized something astonishing. They believed me. Or rather, they believed in the version of Ms. Carter they'd created. That night, Kelly called again. So? How's the flea motel? She sneered. It's fine, I said lightly. Actually, more than fine. I had lunch at the head table today. She laughed. What head table? At the Seacliff luncheon. There was silence. Then a scoff. Stop pretending. Everyone knows you can't afford that place. Send me proof. My eyes slid to the balcony, where the table from the luncheon was still visible, lit softly under the night sky. I snapped a photo, sent it. Her reply came minutes later. No way. You photoshopped this. I laughed softly, set my phone down, and poured another glass of champagne. 2 days later, I got the message I'd been waiting for. We're driving up. Can't wait to see this suite of yours. My heart jumped, half with dread, half with anticipation. Let them come. Let them see. When they arrived, I was in the lobby. Kelly, Mark, and 2 of my cousins walked in, faces flushed from the drive. Kelly's eyes scanned the marble, the chandeliers, the staff in crisp uniforms. Then she saw me and froze. Emily, she said, disbelief dripping from her voice. I smiled. Welcome to the Seacliff Grand. The manager approached instantly. Miss Carter, shall I prepare additional accommodations for your guests? Kelly's jaw dropped. Mark blinked. My cousins exchanged wide-eyed glances. Yes, I said smoothly. They'll need 2 rooms. Put them on my account. The words felt surreal on my tongue. My account. Their jaws nearly hit the floor. The manager nodded crisply and gestured to a bellhop, who whisked their bags away. Kelly sputtered. Wait, your account? You have an account here? Yes, I said calmly. Now, would you like to freshen up before dinner? At dinner, their disbelief only deepened. Staff greeted me by name, pouring wine without asking, laying plates with ceremony. Kelly kept staring at me, searching for cracks, waiting for me to slip. Finally, she leaned in. Be honest. Did you win the lottery? Sell a kidney? How are you paying for this? I smiled faintly. Does it matter? We're here now. Mark muttered. This doesn't make sense. They don't treat regular guests like this. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch, savoring their discomfort. The next morning, things escalated. As I sat by the pool, sipping coffee, the manager approached. Ms. Carter, the investors would like to confirm tomorrow's meeting. Do you prefer the terrace or the main hall? Kelly, lounging nearby, nearly spit out her drink. Investors? She hissed when the manager left. What investors? I shrugged. Apparently, I'm important to them. She gawked. You? Important? Emily, you're not making sense. Tell me the truth. I looked at her evenly. The truth is, you told me I didn't belong here. And now? The manager asked for my signature. Not yours. Her face reddened. For once, she had no comeback. That night, as I stood on the balcony watching the sun dip into the ocean, I felt something I hadn't in years. Power. Not the kind that comes from money or influence, but from finally breaking free of the cage my family had built around me. The cage of doubt, mockery, smallness. For once, they were the ones speechless. And it was only the beginning. The glow of power is addictive. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the sister who had to justify herself or endure sneers at the dinner table. At the Seacliff Grand, I was Miss Carter, a guest whose name carried weight, who drew nods and whispers, who signed folders that made managers scurry. But my family couldn't stand it. By the second night of their stay, Kelly's smile had curdled into suspicion. She watched every interaction between me and the staff like she was waiting for the curtain to fall and reveal a shabby stage. Mark muttered about looking into the billing. My cousins whispered to each other, giggling nervously, but their eyes darted toward me in something like awe. At dinner, Kelly leaned forward, her tone too sweet. "So, Emily, how exactly did you swing this? A little discount? Some misunderstanding?" I took a slow sip of wine. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it does," she said sharply. "Because none of this makes sense. You don't belong in a suite. You don't host investors. You're—" She caught herself, but the implication hung in the air. "You're you. The sister who doesn't measure up." The waiter arrived just then, presenting the next course with a flourish. "Compliments of the chef, Miss Carter." Kelly's words shriveled. Mark's fork clattered against his plate. My cousins stared, wide-eyed. I smiled. Apparently, I do belong here. Later that evening, I overheard them in the hallway outside their rooms. "She's lying," Kelly hissed. "There's no way she can afford this." "Then how do you explain the way they treat her?" one cousin whispered. "There's some mistake," Kelly snapped. "I'll find out what it is." Her words sent a flicker of nerves through me. Because she wasn't wrong. There was a mistake. The Carter account wasn't me, at least not the version my family knew. And if Kelly dug deep enough, she might find cracks. But fear gave way to something else. Determination. If she wanted to play detective, let her. I'd spent years under her scrutiny, years watching her mock me in front of family. This time the stage was mine. The next morning, I joined the investors' breakfast. They spoke in quick, confident tones about figures I barely understood, but I listened carefully, nodding when appropriate. My silence, I realized, made me seem even more powerful, like I didn't need to prove myself. Across the room, Kelly lurked by the juice station, pretending to pour orange juice while straining to hear. When the manager introduced me as our esteemed guest, Miss Carter, her jaw dropped. After breakfast, she cornered me near the elevators. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Having coffee," I said coolly. "Don't play dumb. They think you're someone you're not. They think you're rich or powerful or I don't know, but this isn't you. I'm going to tell them." I met her eyes steadily. "Go ahead." She blinked. "What?" "Tell them. Walk up to the manager and say, 'Excuse me, I think you're treating my sister too well.' See how that goes." Her face reddened. "This isn't funny." "No," I said softly. "It's not. For once in my life, I'm not the one being laughed at. And you hate it." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, leaving her sputtering in the hallway. That afternoon, while lounging by the pool, a staff member approached with a tray. "Miss Carter, the spa is ready whenever you are. We've reserved the Ocean View suite for your treatment." Kelly was nearby, pretending to read a magazine. Her eyes snapped up at the words. I stood, smoothing my dress, and said loudly enough for her to hear, "Thank you. Please add it to my account." Her magazine crumpled in her hands. By the time evening came, the tension was unbearable. My cousins were caught between awe and loyalty to Kelly. Mark paced, muttering about financial fraud. Kelly's smile was brittle, her voice edged with venom. Finally, she burst. "Enough. You're making fools of us. You think you can just waltz in here, pretend to be someone you're not, and embarrass me in front of everyone." We were in the lounge, surrounded by guests sipping cocktails. Heads turned. The music seemed to hush. I set my glass down calmly. "Embarrass you? Kelly, I didn't invite you here. You came to prove me wrong. How's that working out for you?" Her face twisted. "You're pathetic." The manager, who happened to be nearby, approached with a frown. "Is everything all right, Miss Carter?" I smiled sweetly. "Everything's fine. My sister is just unused to this environment." The manager's gaze flicked to Kelly, cool and dismissive, before returning to me with warmth. "If there's anything you need, Miss Carter, just let me know." Kelly's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The humiliation on her face was worth every hour I'd worked, every sacrifice I'd made. That night, alone in my suite, I stood on the balcony watching the waves crash against the cliffs. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. My phone buzzed with a message from Kelly. "This isn't over. I'll find out how you're doing this. And when I do, you'll regret it." I stared at the screen, then set it aside. For the first time, I didn't feel fear at her threats. I felt anticipation. Because this was more than a vacation now. This was war. And I was winning. The morning after Kelly's hiss threat, the air at the Seacliff Grand felt different. It wasn't just the salty breeze or the faint scent of jasmine drifting across the poolside lounge. It was the charged silence of a sibling determined to strike. Kelly avoided me at breakfast, her eyes darting between the staff and her phone. Mark muttered constantly about calling the bank and checking records. My cousins whispered nervously, glancing at me like I'd grown two heads. The only time Kelly spoke directly was to announce, in a voice dripping with false cheer, "We'll all be attending the gala tonight. It should be interesting." The gala. Every Friday, the resort hosted a formal dinner and dance in the Ocean View Ballroom. Guests mingled, investors rubbed shoulders, champagne flowed freely. I'd seen it in the weekly itinerary, but hadn't planned to attend. Now I realized Kelly intended it as her stage. All day, she flitted between staff, asking questions in that faux-friendly tone she used when fishing for gossip. I watched from my lounge chair as she cornered the concierge, then the bartender, then even the housekeeping staff. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were sharp. She wanted to find the crack, the slip, the reveal that I wasn't who they thought I was. But each time, staff glanced at me and smiled warmly. "Ms. Carter." Always Ms. Carter. By evening, I felt oddly calm. For years, I'd feared Kelly's judgment, her scorn, the way she twisted everything I did into something laughable. But here, at the Seacliff Grand, the tables had turned. Tonight, I wasn't the butt of her joke. I was the center of attention. I dressed carefully. A simple navy dress I'd packed for just in case, hair swept into a neat bun, a silver necklace my grandmother had given me years ago. Nothing extravagant, but elegant enough. When I entered the ballroom, heads turned. The chandeliers glowed like constellations, the marble floor gleamed, and a quartet played softly near the stage. The manager spotted me instantly, approaching with a smile. "Ms. Carter, welcome. We've reserved a place for you at the head table." Kelly, who had just entered with her entourage, froze mid-step. Her face was a mask of disbelief. I followed the manager to the front, where investors and resort executives greeted me warmly. Kelly's eyes burned holes in my back. Halfway through dinner, she made her move. Rising from her chair at a nearby table, she raised her glass and said loudly, "I just want to say how proud I am of my sister, Emily. She's managed to pull off something none of us thought possible. After all, who would expect someone like her to be here, among all of you?" The room went still. Conversations hushed. I felt dozens of eyes on me. Kelly smiled sweetly, but her voice carried venom. Of course, it does make one wonder. How exactly she afforded all this? Doesn't it? A murmur rippled through the crowd. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm. I rose slowly, setting my napkin aside. "Thank you, Kelly," I said evenly. "You're right. It is surprising. After all, when I first mentioned booking this trip, my family laughed at me. They said I couldn't afford it. They mocked me. They told me I didn't belong." Gasps and murmurs filled the air. Kelly's smile faltered. "But here I am," I continued. "And not just here. Here as someone the resort values. Someone they trust enough to reserve tables, host meetings, and yes, sign important documents. Maybe the question isn't how I afforded this. Maybe the question is why my own family couldn't believe in me." The silence was electric. Guests leaned forward, eyes wide. The manager stepped forward smoothly, addressing the room. "Miss Carter is indeed one of our esteemed guests." Her account with us is long-standing and highly valued. We are honored by her presence." Kelly's face crumpled. She sputtered, but, she's lying." All eyes turned to her. The manager's expression cooled. "Madam, I would caution against making such accusations in this establishment." Kelly's cheeks burned scarlet. She looked around, desperate for support, but none came. Even Mark stared at his plate, unwilling to meet her gaze. I lifted my glass. "To family," I said softly, "and to learning who truly stands beside you." The room erupted in polite applause. The quartet swelled with music. Guests turned back to their meals, conversations resuming, but the balance had shifted. Kelly sat down heavily, her face pale. She didn't speak for the rest of the night. Later, as I walked back to my suite, one of the investors approached. "You handled that with grace, Miss Carter. Not everyone could." I smiled faintly. "Thank you." Inside my suite, I stood by the window, watching the moonlight shimmer across the ocean. For years, Kelly had humiliated me in front of others. Tonight, she tried again and failed spectacularly. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd planned to expose me. Instead, she'd exposed herself. And the best part? This was only the beginning. The morning after the gala, the air at the Seacliff Grand buzzed with the aftermath. Guests nodded at me in passing, some even stopping to compliment how I'd handled myself with elegance. Staff greeted me with smiles warmer than ever. But Kelly? She didn't come down for breakfast. Neither did Mark. My cousins appeared briefly, their faces flushed with awkwardness, then scurried back upstairs. Clearly, Kelly was licking her wounds, or plotting. By noon, I had my answer. As I lounged by the pool, sipping a cold drink, the concierge approached with a frown. "Miss Carter, I apologize for disturbing you, but there's an issue." He leaned down, lowering his voice. "Your sister has been speaking to guests, telling them you're a fraud, that you don't belong here." Heat rushed to my cheeks, not from shame, but from fury. Of course, she couldn't let it go. "Thank you," I said coolly. "I'll handle it." And handle it I did. I found Kelly near the spa entrance, cornering a couple from New York I'd spoken with at breakfast earlier in the week. She was mid-sentence, her voice shrill. "She doesn't have money. She's pretending. This is all a mistake." "Kelly," I said sharply. She spun, her face flushed. "Oh, look, the princess arrives." The couple exchanged glances and muttered an excuse, slipping away. "You need to stop," I told her, my voice low but firm. "Stop." She laughed bitterly. "You humiliated me last night. You think I'll just sit quietly while you play queen of the castle?" "I didn't humiliate you," I said evenly. "You did that yourself." Her eyes glittered with rage. "You've always been jealous of me. The pretty one, the successful one, the one mom and dad loved more. And now you've found some trick, some scam, to make yourself look important. But I'll prove it. I'll rip that crown right off your head." For the first time, her words didn't pierce me. They rolled off like water. "Do your worst," I said softly. "You'll only bury yourself deeper." She stormed off, but I knew she wasn't finished. That night it happened. I was in the lounge, chatting with a group of guests, when Kelly marched in with Mark trailing behind her. In her hand, she held a printed paper, shaking it triumphantly. "This," she shouted, waving it in the air. "This proves my sister doesn't belong here. She's not rich. She's not an investor. She's a liar." The lounge went silent. Heads turned. My stomach clenched. She slammed the paper down on the table in front of me. Her bank statement. "She barely has enough to cover this trip. She's been lying to all of you." Gasps rippled through the room. I glanced at the paper. It was a screenshot of my checking account, one I'd foolishly left open on my laptop weeks ago when Kelly visited. My balance wasn't impressive. Certainly not what anyone would expect of a VIP. My heart raced, but I forced my face calm. "So, you broke into my laptop to find this?" She sneered. "Doesn't matter how I found it. What matters is you're exposed. You don't belong here." For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Then the manager appeared, her expression cool as steel. "Madam," she said sharply to Kelly, "this is unacceptable." Kelly blinked. "What?" "You've violated your sister's privacy, disrupted our guests, and spread slander. Miss Carter is one of our esteemed clients. Her financial details are irrelevant to her standing here."
But
The manager raised a hand. "Enough. You and your husband will vacate the premises immediately. Your behavior is disgraceful." The gasp this time was louder. Guests stared openly. My cousins shrank in their chairs. Kelly's face drained of color. "You can't." "I can," the manager said firmly. "And I will." Security. 2 staff members appeared at once, their expressions professional but firm. Mark sputtered, "This is ridiculous," but one look from security silenced him. They gathered their things, red-faced and furious, while Kelly screamed, "This isn't over, Emily. You'll regret this. Everyone will see you for the fraud you are." I stood slowly, my hands steady. "Kelly," I said, my voice carrying through the lounge, "for years, you've belittled me. You've mocked me, laughed at me, told me I wasn't enough.
and now,
Everyone sees the truth.
not about me.
About you." Her face twisted with rage, but security guided her toward the doors. When they were gone, the manager turned to me, her expression softening. "I'm so sorry you had to endure that, Miss Carter. Please know, you are always welcome here. The Carter account is one of our most valued relationships, and we honor you as such." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you." Guests murmured in support. Some even clapped lightly. Later, alone in my suite, I sank into the armchair by the window, staring out at the moonlit ocean. My heart still raced, but beneath it was a profound calm. Kelly had tried everything: mockery, whispers, outright exposure. And each attempt had only backfired. She had wanted me small. Instead, she'd made me larger than ever. And tomorrow, I knew, would bring the final reckoning. Because vacations end. But this one was going to follow her home. The morning after Kelly was escorted out, the Seacliff Grand felt lighter, almost as if the walls themselves had exhaled. For the first time since my family arrived, I could walk through the marble lobby without feeling her shadow dogging my heels, whispering venom at my back. Guests I barely knew smiled warmly as I passed. "Good morning, Miss Carter," they said. Some even stopped to offer quiet encouragement. "You handled yourself with such grace." Or, "She showed her true colors." Each word stitched strength back into the places my sister had torn for years. I sat at breakfast by the window, the ocean glowing gold in the morning sun, and for once, I didn't hunch my shoulders or shrink from glances. I lifted my coffee, head high, savoring the taste of victory. By noon, word had spread beyond the resort walls. My cousins, who had been whispering in corners for days, came to me sheepishly. "We're sorry," one of them murmured. "We shouldn't have followed Kelly. You didn't deserve what she did." I looked at them evenly. "You joined her laughter when she mocked me. You believed her lies because it was easier than believing me." They lowered their eyes. "We know, but after last night we see it now. You were right." I didn't reply. Forgiveness, I realized, was no longer mine to give so easily. That evening, the manager invited me to a private dinner on the terrace. The sea stretched endlessly before us, waves glittering under lantern light. She raised a glass. "To resilience," she said. Not everyone could have faced such attacks and stood taller for it. I clinked my glass softly against hers. "To resilience," I echoed. And yet, as I lay in bed that night, the truth pressed on me. Kelly's words, her fury, her humiliation, this wasn't just about a resort.
It was years in the making.
Childhood dinners where my successes were ignored, teenage years when my dreams were dismissed, adulthood where every accomplishment was belittled. The Seacliff Grand was just the stage. But here, for once, the curtain had risen on a different ending. When I checked out 2 days later, the manager herself walked me to the car. Staff lined the lobby, bowing politely. "Please come back anytime, Miss Carter," she said warmly. "You'll always have a place here." As I drove down the winding coastal road, the ocean stretching vast and free beside me, my phone buzzed with messages.
Kelly.
You humiliated me. You think you've won? Everyone back home will hear my side. Another followed. Mom and Dad are furious. They think you've turned into a monster. And then, the last one. I hate you. I always have. I pulled the car over, staring at the screen. For a moment, her words stung. Old wounds tearing open. But then, slowly, I realized something. I didn't need her love. I didn't need her approval. I didn't even need her to admit she was wrong. Because I had something stronger. Proof. Proof that when the world doubted me, when she tried to strip me bare, I stood tall. Proof that her lies had collapsed under their own weight. I deleted her messages one by one and drove on. When I returned home, the world felt different. My apartment, once cramped, now felt like a sanctuary. My car, though old, felt like freedom. Because they were mine, earned, not handed, not promised and stolen. At the next family dinner, months later, after the dust had settled, I walked into Kelly's house with my head high. Conversations faltered. Mom gave me a strained smile. Dad muttered a hello.
Kelly didn't look at me.
She sat stiffly, her eyes darting anywhere but toward mine. The cousins, however, greeted me warmly. Emily, one whispered, you were amazing. Dinner passed in stilted conversation. At one point, Kelly tried to make a jab. Well, some of us can't live at resorts forever, right?
I set my fork down calmly.
You're right. Resorts end. But respect? That lasts. Her face tightened, her fork trembling in her hand. The silence that followed was thick. For once, no one laughed with her. When I left that night, I felt lighter than I ever had. Kelly could stew in her bitterness, could cling to the scraps of a stage that no longer existed. My parents could choose blindness, could pretend balance where there was none. But me? I had chosen something else. I had chosen to live free of their judgment, to claim victories they said I couldn't, to walk through the world without apology. The resort manager's words echoed in my mind. You'll always have a place here. But I realized I didn't need the Seacliff Grand anymore. Because I had built my own Seacliff inside me. And from now on, no one, not Kelly, not my parents, not anyone could take it away.